who's joined us so far. This is a session on food sovereignty and traditional agriculture and the relationship we see to these existing activities and the changes that are coming with climate change and how we might adapt to those. We have for everyone today an exciting group of speakers, including Deb Echohawk, Jessika Greendeer, Philmonea Kebec, Leah Zeise, and Ron Brownotter. And what we will do is start with short presentations from each of our speakers, and then we'll follow up with questions and answers at the end. During this session, I've asked everyone, please stay muted and keep your videos off unless you are speaking. And we can open things up after when we get to Q&A, but I'd like to try to keep the data use down for everyone until we need to change. I have put in the chat the link to the meeting evaluation. Please evaluate it afterwards when we're done. And please feel free to add whatever questions you have to the chat. We will bring those up to the speakers afterwards when we open up and have a free-form discussion. And so I'd like to start first with Deb Echohawk. Now, Deb, if you'd please introduce yourself and tell us about the part you play in food sovereignty and the kind of agriculture you do and your perspectives on climate change.
Noah, my name is Joshua Hukut. I am the keeper of the seeds for the Pawnee Nation, and I am residing in Pawnee, Oklahoma. Let's see here. Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me over here to this wonderful opportunity to talk about our climate adaptation. I thought I would start off with a little bit about our what the Pawnee Seed Preservation Project is, and welcome you to learn more about us on Facebook. We have Pawnee Seed Preservation Project site that really is like a diary. It has a lot of photos and explanation as to what we're doing. But I thought that I would talk about our historically a little what we believe before I go into the questions that I've been asked to address. And so for hundreds of years, we lived in Nebraska, Kansas, and our project is one to revitalize our Pawnee native crops. Believing in the power of prayer, our ancestral doctors used plants to perform healing ceremonies. In the Pawnee context, those ceremonies were necessary to trigger the healing powers of those plants. Spiritual blessers designated by the seed keepers and our Nasharo Council of Chiefs conduct a ceremony to bless the seeds before they're distributed. They'll be distributed right after Earth Day. The ceremony, we believe, triggers the power of those plants as they grow. Prayers and songs are given as the crops grow. At the harvest reveal, we celebrate by recognizing the growers and pray that the crops offer strength and good health. So what sort of agriculture do I do? Personally, I use the method that our ancestors have always used, and that is what we call the mound or the hill method. And that's where we are able to hoe about a foot tall the soil and up to about 2.5 feet across. and then separated by about a foot to the next hill. Then we also have another method, which is Agro-Ranching. In that, we have cattle that provide our free fertilizer, tromps the ground, so we don't have to use plows. And then we have a cover cropping method that we plant about 7 different varieties of cover that can then be pressed down, and then we can grow our crops there. And this method has been unbelievably wonderful. It practices soil rejuvenation, and it also helps with our the water conservation. In Nebraska, we have 20 gardens, and some of them we call them our science gardens because they're real small. And our point is that we are bringing back our ancestral seeds, and that's been a chore because we almost lost them all. And so for the past 18 years, we've been using these little science gardens to bring back our seeds. And so now we have 18 varieties. We are partnered with the Pawnee Nation College, so we do have a greenhouse to control the climate. And more we're seeing that our Nebraska partners are starting to explore using the greenhouse as well, especially when they had last growing season 17 days of 45-mile-an-hour winds. And then in September, there was near freezing occurrences. So that's something that we're looking into the future to do more of. Another part of the agriculture that we do is transplanting. So on the land that was given back to us, the Pawnee Nation, we're looking at transplanting the wild potatoes, which we lost a lot on the lands due to all the plowing and other methods that contemporary farmers have been using. So we're returning the wild potatoes near the creeks and wild turnips. Okay, so next, how climate change seems to be making changes to our system. We saw down here in Oklahoma, and this is where our tribe was relocated, the soil is much different than that of Nebraska, and then experiencing a near 10-year drought, we started kind of incorporating the hugelkultur techniques, and that's a German method, but it's very appreciated.
I got one.
It's very appreciated because we're able to dig into the mounds deep and then put some either rotten wood, or for us, we just simply put our corn cobs in the very bottom. And then what happens when it rains is that the rotten wood or the corn cobs will soak that up and then do a slow release, and that will help during the drought time, so we don't really need to water that much. Our crops do better when they're not overwatered. We're also seeing that we need more help from pollinators, and so that's one thing that we're also incorporating, is to be able to bring in more pollinator gardens. So we do appreciate our population of bees and butterflies. So we feel that the future is real important in using techniques that our ancestors used. They seem to be working well without having to use any chemicals, and our yield is very high. So, we're just thankful for that. But please feel welcome to, again, visit our Facebook site, Pawnee Nation Seed Preservation Project. And I'll look for you there. Scuccietta, this is Deb. Thank you.
Tadachixteu, Deb. Very grateful for you joining us. Next, we will switch over. And I'd like to say aho to Jessika. And Jessika, please start your presentation when you're ready.
Thank you, Frank, and thank you very much for sharing about your work, Deb. I'm anxious to learn more, so I will definitely follow up and check you all out.
You've seen him riding his bike.
Good afternoon, every one of you. My name is Jessika Greendeer, and I'm a member of the Deer Clan and Haudenosaunee of Wisconsin. I work for an amazing organization called Dream of Wild Health. And Dream of Wild Health, we're a Native nonprofit organization, and our tagline, we grow seeds and leaders. So our work is focused on our youth, ensuring that our youth are equipped with all the tools that they need to be successful, and to also carry on the work of our ancestors. Our mission is to restore health and well-being in the Native community by recovering knowledge of and access to healthy Indigenous foods, medicines, and lifeways. And how we're able to achieve that is, well, some of our stats from last year. When the pandemic hit, we knew that we needed to provide more food to our community. And the community we serve is the Minneapolis and St. Paul Native urban community. We were able to donate more than 5,400 pounds of produce on our 10-acre property. And essentially, in the production space, we only have about 4.5 acres of tillable land. So just to give you some perspective on the amount of food that we were able to donate, but then we also had grown more than 8 tons of food last year. From last March, we added another 20 acres, which is down the street from our farm in Hugo. It worked out perfectly. So we are currently regenerating the soil there, and we'll implement more of like an agroforestry layout to that particular property, with the inclusion of an additional processing center for our vegetables, a commercial kitchen on site for farmers to work on their land or their value added products. And part of that land will also transition into incubating farmers. So one of the biggest issues that Native peoples and people of color have as a challenge or barrier is land access. So we wanted to be able to provide some space for our urban Native farmers who are interested in growing, give them a piece of land, but also the facilities to be able to make that a product they're either sharing with the community or providing for their family. Last year, even though we did have to scale down some of our operations or the amount of personnel we had at the farm, so we were only able to provide space for 38 youth last year, which is down from our usual about 60 youth per summer. We're also one of the organizations of the Indigenous Food Network. The Indigenous Food Network is a network of Native nonprofit organizations, as well as other partnering community organizations in an effort to work on food sovereignty within the urban space of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And we're able to do this because of our farm. Our farm is a safe place for our children. It's a place where they come and they are able to continue with the work that our ancestors had done, but it's also a place for them to have access to green space. They learn how to tend the gardens, as well as harvesting and then preparing those foods as they come in from the field to the kitchen. We do have 3 separate youth programs. The Chorus Kids program is a 1-week program for ages 8 to 12. And then we have our more experienced or our little older youth, 13 to 18-year-olds join our Garden Warriors program, which is about a 3-week program. And the Youth Leader program is a year-round program that we offer to some of our more experienced youth that are in our Garden Warrior program. So the youth leaders, not only in a non-COVID time, would be participating in different community outreach activities, but they're also, they have a culinary internship program or a chef internship program. And we have been able to transition that to virtual. So they've been doing it on Zoom. And it's so beautiful to see our youth getting their ingredients and being able to make dinner for their families. Every day at the farm with our Garden Warriors, we have farm warriors and garden warriors. So we'll have 2 volunteers who will help make lunch for their peers. And then we'll also have 2 farm warriors who will do some extra work around the farm. Both elements of our on-farm programming for the Chorus Kids and Garden Warriors, youth learn everything from soil health to plant health, to preparing everything in the kitchen. And then they're also learning as well about our wild plant relatives. So our cultural outreach coordinator is Hope Flanagan, who's super knowledgeable on our wild plant relatives and is able to implement part of that into the youth's curriculum. And the youth leaders are such, being at Dream of Wild Health provides me a lot of hope as someone who's doing the work as an adult, but knowing our future is bright when we have our young people stepping up to learn what they can do to just be better versions of us, to be able to carry that torch and continue on for the rest of their lives, thinking of food sovereignty as part of their life. And our seeds at Dream of Wild Health were donated by Cora Baker, who was a Potawatomi seed keeper. And she was able to, with the help of her daughter, her granddaughter and her grandson were able to share their seeds with the organization, so that way our youth had seeds to work with. And since then, we've helped with different rematriation of seed back to home communities where there had been, where those seeds had been absent within the community. And 2019 was the first year that we had essentially a seed regeneration team, where we focused strictly on the Indigenous seeds within the collection and improve the health and viability of those seeds. And then, primarily to form a relationship with them. The most important part about seed stewardship is not only being able to take care of the seeds, but getting them ready for our future generations, and also the climate instability we face. And you can feel free to connect with us at all of our different social media avenues, as well as our website. I know there are a couple things I would like to address. The kind of agriculture that we do at Dream of Wild Health is regenerative organic agriculture without the certifications. So we're focused on soil health, improving what we can to the land, restoring different things to the land to ensure that our seeds have the healthiest environment they could grow into. We do have larger equipment, so there is some plowing that we do or some tractor work that we do at the farm, but we do try to minimize that as much as possible. We also, like Pawnee, we incorporate cover crops into our growing plan. So we always have a ground cover. We're always trying to put something back into the soil. And that's kind of, the focus that we do there. At my home farm, I also use the hugelkultur system, just utilizing the elements that we have around us in our environment to help build up the soil. Our soil has taken such a beating within the last not even 100 years. and we think about the loss of topsoil and how precious our soil is, how precious everything is around us. And so I think it's incredibly important for us to try to repair the damages that have been done by the human species in general. So that's why we spend so much more time soil building than we do, I guess, actually thinking of ourselves as farmers. You know, how I see climate change affecting what I do, it's so evident every year when we're observant to what's going on around us. Our seeds have come from a different time, and so bringing them into into our current climate is different from when they started or where they had come from. And of course, climate change has been happening for such a long time, but not necessarily in the grand scheme of things. So it's trying to do the very best that we can to improve it for our future generations, and making sure that we did the very best that we could when we're passing all of this on to them, wanting to make sure that we're passing on solutions and not problems to our future. Some of the things that we have had to change, or the ways that we see we can change things in climate change, is to not only ensure that our seeds are being grown as much as possible, and being able to, gain that resiliency through each changing growing season, because each growing season is a little bit different from one another. And so we've continued to incorporate other elements within our environment. So we're not just focused on annual production, we're also looking toward perennial production, because all of those different elements within our landscape just improve our biodiversity. One of the aspects that Hope, one of my colleagues, do at Dream of Wild Health is she watches the wild plants as they not only come onto the landscape, but are also disappearing from our landscape, and finding ways to sort of observe and see what else we could possibly do to find those different foods and medicines even out in the wild. So waingin up for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Well, Pina Gigi, Jessica, appreciate that. I look forward to our audience members bringing some questions later. Now we will switch, and so I'd like to say bonjour to Philmonea, Quebec, and welcome you to introduce yourself and share some of your perspectives.
Bonjour, Ginawa. Bobby Washington Nakaz Mukwendo de Mushkazibing in Donjaba. All right, let me pull this little thing over here. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about today, thank you so much, first of all, for for the invitation to discuss this with you all. I have so much great respect for Menominee Nation and all the wonderful things that you're doing at the college. And it's been very interesting to hear the other presenters today. So I'm gonna, we're gonna switch gears a little bit, and we're gonna, talk more about the wild food harvest. And I'm with the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. So right now I'm on Gichi Wequayong. This is the Ashland, Wisconsin. I'm on the south shore of Lake Superior. That's where Glyphwick is based, but we work with 11 Ojibwe tribes, and we work with them on their off-reservation treaty rights. And so what I do at Glyphwick is I work in the Division of Intergovernmental Affairs, and we support the tribes' work related to policy and intergovernmental relations. And I've done some work in climate change and with respect to food in my work. And this is really because our food culture is based around the production of, highly nutritious food that's wild harvested food coming from our environment. We don't have a very strong tradition of intentionally grown agriculture. Our agriculture is about being in the forest, hunting, fishing, working with the plants that are available in those forest areas, in the swamps. And one of the things that we've really been looking at for the past couple of years is this idea that our foods, our wild harvested foods, are not seen as agriculture and are not, our food traditions are not respected as much as, the food traditions that are associated with planting seeds and um, animal husbandry. One of the reasons is that, we don't necessarily have regulations around food safety. And so that was one of the barriers that we looked at within our program at Glyphwick to see if we could make some changes to that. So, certainly we have law, and we have law around food. And our law is oftentimes our law around food is more of our customary law. And our law is really wrapped up in our cultural traditions, our spiritual traditions. And we have, this idea that as an Anishinaabe, we have these responsibilities to harvest food at particular times. We think of this as a seasonal round, and our language is really focused around this. Our cultural traditions are focused around this, and our food traditions are also focused around this. And so it's really our responsibility as an Anishinaabe to get out there during the various seasons and do some harvesting. Right now we're in fish harvesting season. We just wrapped up with maple sugar production, and so a lot of people are really focusing on that particular thing. And we believe that if we continue to adhere to our cultural traditions, if we continue to make food on the water and in the forests and in the land, that this relates to our Anishinaabe-ness, our cultural distinctivity, and then in turn relates to our right to our traditional territories to be there and to continue to have that relationship with those beings, with the water and the land. And so, as you may know, we entered into a series of treaties with the United States. Our land rights, our direct land rights were ceded to the United States, but we made agreements with the United States that we would be able to continue to practice our way of life. And that, that is sort of captured in those words, hunting and fishing in some of the treaties, hunting and fishing, gathering wild rice and other of the treaties. But the tribes really think about these rights as very all-encompassing. And so, they don't just relate to, shooting a gun and killing an animal, but it's about being on that land, having a relationship with that land, bringing our kids onto that land, um, having a relationship with those animals that extends before and after there's any killing that happens. And so, it's a much more inclusive and all-encompassing thing. I mean, it's even about being able to birth our children in a particular way, to be able to educate them. So, certainly, this is a picture right here of the 2016 flood in Bad River. I'm from Bad River. It was a really scary time. Our community was, we couldn't go in or out of the reservation. There was no, we were cut off from food and water delivery and, dialysis. People had to get helicoptered in and out of Bad River, out of Odina, in order to get dialysis for that week that the community was cut off. Tribes are particularly vulnerable to impacts that degrade the environment because we're place-based, and our communities depend on these, all these different wildlife species, the fish and plants, and we can't always control all these inputs that are happening. So there can be a you know, a state can issue a permit just off the reservation, saying a big industrial company can do can conduct a very toxic process just outside our reservation within our off reservation areas, and this would have an impact within our communities, within those off reservation areas. We have wildlife diseases like chronic wasting disease that are, you know, impacted certainly by non-native processes and regulations that the tribes really don't have, um, can't control what's going on in these situations. So, you know, we have tools. We have a climate adaptation and mitigation strategy that's available here. And, you know, Indigenous food sovereignty is a really big deal. So some of our, you may be familiar with some of our foods. We're really working to reestablish our traditional foodways and maintain our tribal sovereignty over food production. We just ended a 3-year project that was funded through the ANA to provide some technical assistance to tribes in supporting their wild food production on and off reservation. So we created a model food code for the processing, preparation, transport of many different traditional foods. These were based on reports that we produced, scientific literature on food safety. Then we have model food safety plans. We also did a number of trainings for harvesters and governmental staff about this project and about, you know, the food safety standards. So we created a model food processing code, and this is about, you know, this is about really supporting local food production to de-emphasize the, you know, the commercial food that is brought into our communities. All these federal dollars are used to create, you know, to bring in foods that are not always healthy for our communities, highly processed foods. And our own food processing, our own food production is de-emphasized, which means that, you know, these dollars for our communities are going to places far, far away and not, you know, not recirculating within our own communities, not building up our own tribal food production systems. So this this food code, it addresses these 16 foods that were identified by our communities. And it really, in a systematic way, it addresses the food safety risks that we identified in the literature. It's tailored to our Ojibwe food harvesting practices, and it's intended to be no more restrictive than state or federal standards. Our food code is available, and all the reports, it's about almost 900 pages of material. It's available on our Glyphwick website. I will certainly stick the URL in the chat once I get done here. I'm done. I'm done with my 10 minutes. Look forward to all your questions. Thank you so much for listening. And I will stop sharing right now.
Well, Miigwech, Philomena, very interesting. I'll look forward to hearing more about this in the question and answer, and appreciate bringing in a different perspective so that agriculture and food is not only things we plant. I'd like to say Sagoli to Leah. Leah, please join us, turn on your video and introduce yourself and get underway.
Saguli swagwek, hat kahuni ni ungiat to huene o kalelia Zeise ni ungiat to sunage, wagwaho ni wagita loda, oni ota aga ni wagayuhun joda, the laguane ni wagenio. Hello everyone, my Oneida name is Hutkahuni and my English name is Leah Zeise, and I'm Wolf Clan, I'm Oneida, and I'm from the place where the ducks gather. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about Ohe Lagu, which is a cooperative that got started in Oneida about 6 years ago now. So I will tell you a little bit about the resilience in our teachings, and then we'll move forward through time from there. So traditionally, the Haudenosaunee people, like a lot of other Indigenous people, planted the Three Sisters together. And that prevents rapid soil degeneration and promotes a diverse soil microbiome. So nutrients get added back into the soil each year, and then we would add in fish guts and ashes and other traditional soil amendments. And then on top of that, we would rotate our village every 20 years. So we would pick up and move, and we wouldn't make it back to the same place until 100 years later. So that gives a chance for the soil, the forests, all our other relatives to regenerate in that 100 years until we make our way back. So those knowledge and teachings that are from those olden times, the seeds, were all kept alive by those who walked before us. And I just want to say that I'm so grateful to them because they really persevered through really hard times to make sure that my generation could grow our foods. And I really don't know where we would be without them. So we started our journey of farming as a cooperative about 7 years ago. And we really could not have done it without the guidance of the more experienced farmers and elders that taught us everything that we know, basically. But it really makes us stop and think then what kind of ancestors we want to be and what do we want to pass on to the faces that are still in the ground. And when we got started farming, we got started during a very uncertain time, right? So NOAA released a report in 2012 that declared that anyone born after April of 1985 has only ever experienced warmer than average climactic temperatures. So, you see the graph and the temperature swings. Well, we've never swung below the average. We've always been warmer than that. So with that in mind, right now, we are realizing that we have a lot of work to do to adapt and to start mitigating the risk that the next generation is going to face. So we're experiencing climate chaos now. Even since we just started a few years ago, we have had floods, we've had droughts, we've had these irregular late spring rains that really prevent us from getting the corn in the ground in a timely manner. And so this is a picture of one of our fields, and you can see how much was lost to flooding. In 2019, we lost 90% of what we planted due to flooding. So we dropped from harvesting 10,000 pounds of corn to 1,000 pounds of corn. So to adapt to those changing years, we are looking to our ancestors for direction and working together to move forward. The biggest thing that we're doing is working as a cooperative. So we started with just 10 families, and we grow all together in a couple of big fields. And so we have monthly meetings, we practice our language at those meetings, and we make decisions through consensus, which is a callback to our traditional governance structure. And then we work together side by side all year long, planting, weeding, and harvesting. And so by just doing that alone, we're practicing resilience, we're practicing cultural resilience and climate resilience. And so we often have 2 or 3 generations out working together at the same time, passing on that knowledge to the next generation. And it's not always easy, it's not always sunshine and rainbows, but the conflicts also give us a chance to learn about traditional techniques of resolution, conflict resolution. So I would say that working together is our #1 adaptation strategy. And it allows us to problem solve with everybody's gifts in the circle because we believe that everybody has unique gifts to share. We also have some production techniques that we use for adaptation. So the picture on the right is that same field that you saw earlier, but with a new practice. And so we bought a hiller in 2020 and it mounds up the soil really beautifully. And so the mounds with the flags in them, you can see here, this is where we would plant our corn, beans, and squash. And then in between that, we have a row of cover crops. So we're kind of mixing together a couple of different techniques here. And even though this is new to us, it's not a new practice. It's not even new to the area. Frank Kutka actually sent me some research and presentations on the ancestral mound systems that are found in Menominee and Ho-Chunk territory. And so, we like to think that we're reconnecting to the ancestors that walked here before us when we put these old systems back into practice. And this really saved us that year. You can see how much standing water was there. If we hadn't used the hiller, we would have lost that crop again. which we did end up losing anyway because the cranes came in and ate all our corn, but you know, you got to try baby steps. So I want to talk about then moving from adaptation into mitigation. And this is a little science lesson you might remember growing up. Photosynthesis, right? The plants breathe in carbon dioxide, CO2, and then they breathe out the O2, the oxygen. And the carbon is stored in the plant, and the excess carbon is actually then stored in the soil. And so that carbon gets locked up in the soil. You come through and harvest your plants in the fall. And if you don't plant anything else after you harvest, you have bare soil that starts giving off that CO2. And then in the spring, you go in and till up that soil and it releases all of that stored carbon. So this NASA picture here shows you April of 2006, all of the carbon that's being released into the atmosphere as the northern hemisphere starts to till up their soils in the spring. And then you can see in the fall, the plants are all growing and locking that carbon away, and it really calms back down. And then in winter, we've picked everything, the soil is bare again, and that red is creeping back up. So we're getting around that cycle by keeping living plants in the soil year round. And this is something you've heard from Jessika and from Deb already. And it's definitely something that we're doing, is using cover crops to make sure that we have living plants, living roots in the soil year round. So they help us rebuild our soil, right, by adding that carbon into the soil, that organic matter. When your soils are healthy, you get higher rates of water infiltration, so you don't have as much flooding like we saw in that first field. And then you also lose less of your topsoil to spring rains and floods. So as you're building organic matter and ultimately a healthy soil microbiome, you're helping your plants thrive by supporting that nutrient uptake. So this cover cropping might seem like a drastic departure from traditional farming, like it's not related, but I actually think it is related, because if you think about village rotation and the plants that would regrow in that 100 years until we came back, this is what we're doing with this cover cropping. We're rotating our fields so that the soil gets a chance to regenerate, and we're increasing the number of species in that same spot, so we have a healthier microbiome that adapts to all of those different species. So though we can't move our village every 20 years anymore, we can rotate our fields, and that's what we're doing now. So we have two methods of doing that. We're intercropping, which means planting cover crops in between the rows. So we're trying red clover, plantain, and chicory this year. And then we also have no-till. So this September, when we go in and harvest our corn, we will put in a rustic rye, and that'll grow all winter long, actually. So it'll kind of stop that cycle of having that red color pop back up on the map. And then in the spring, we'll come down with this machine that you see here is a roller crimper, and it basically like steam rolls over that cover crop. And then we can plant right into that. So the cover crop creates a mat on the soil, which keeps the weeds down and starts adding nutrients back into the soil. It's called a green fertilizer. And then we have a special planter that can come through and open up the soil, drop the seed in, and cover back up. So we're going to be practicing and experimenting with that. And this is all possible. I mean, we're just a small group of volunteers, right? So we're working with a lot of different organizations to make this possible. Oneida Nation has been really supportive of our group. We have access to about 20 acres that we grow on. And we only plant about 4 or 5 of that in corn. The rest of it, we are doing cover crops and soil regeneration practices. So in the fall, when we harvest our corn, of course, we're looking for saving the seeds, the most resilient seeds from year to year. We're taking those yearly climate notes so that we know, oh, this year was a really big flood, but we had some corn that survived, so this corn is then more resilient to flooding. So we'll make notes of that in our seeds so that we know, as the climate's changing, what we can count on in our different seeds. And then increasing the diversity of what we're growing so that if one crop fails, maybe something else will be resilient enough to make it through those chaotic climate events. So that's kind of everything we're doing in a nutshell. We're hoping to grow the co-op up to 50 families and support other co-ops as they develop. And so there's a hemp cooperative that's gotten started at Oneida, a wild rice co-op is in the works, And I really think this co-op model is really flexible enough to hold our cultural teachings and our values, but then also provide structure and organization for us to stay organized. So I just want to say that this is kind of our secret to resiliency. We can integrate these new practices and these new teachings, these old teachings, and these like new imaginings of old ways of doing things. But that's only possible because we're working together and we're strengthening that chain of knowledge being passed on from one generation to the next. So, Yawanko.
Yes, Yaunko, Leah. Appreciate that. Looking forward to the Q&A shortly. And now we're going to switch to Ron Brownotter. So haukola, Ron, please feel free to unmute and turn on a video if you like and give your presentation.
Hold on. Let's see what I'm doing here. Right. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think there's a picture. I can't.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know about the picture, but
Right here in the bottom.
this is Ronald Charles Brownotter. There you go. And apologize for that, but here I go. I'm from the Standing Rock Sioux Indian Reservation, and I live on the original allotment that my grandmother had when they did the homesteading Dawes Act. And she never sold her land, so she passed it down to my dad and then down to us. And that's where our, I call it, I guess, our headquarters, or we raise a buffalo. And we have been doing this for approximately 21 years. And it all started with a dream, and it's come to this point. To share a little bit about the dream, it's a big part of why I'm talking. Is standing in front of our church, a little town called Bullhead, South Dakota, and I'm a Catholic, and standing there in front of the church is probably noontime, and these buffaloes are running from the east right between me and the church, full speed, and you could hear them breathing in the dust, and to see this heat of the sun during the day about noontime. I didn't understand that dream. I never had one since at that time. But fast forward to now, I believe that dream was meant to happen, and this is where we are raising buffalo now. And when we started raising buffalo back on Standing Rock, prior to that, cattle were here, and because back in the old days, we used to be a nomadic people and follow the herds and live off the buffalo, and I think back then they were true conservationists. They understood the wildlife and the grasses and how the buffalo, like certain grasses, certain time of years, and how fire played a role in that. And fast forward to today, Bureau of Indian Affairs says we don't want no burning, so fire has been suppressed. And what I see coming off of that is we get a lot of small woody plants or shrubs growing more because they're not being controlled by fire. And a lot of the cottonwood trees along the river are dying off. And just a lot of leftover limbs of trees, and it just builds up and it's not being burned and creating more fertilizer for the plants, so to speak. The buffalo has been introduced back here on Standing Rock, and like I said, it was a big part of our culture. And during these years, a lot of this land around us was farmland, farmed for over 30 years. And as a young teenager, I could see the cows out there and trampling the crop, the annual crop that the farmer just planted that summer, spring, or whatever, and trampling down, and the soil and the dust blowing, the wind blowing. And I never really understood that, but it just didn't feel right as a young person, seeing that wind and topsoil blowing away. And as I got older and I went to college at Cal Poly out in California in agriculture, I majored in agronomy, crop production. And then after that, I went after my master's in range science from NDSU, and did all my coursework. And when I was in school, in my agronomy class, one of the classes, I learned about soil erosion and how that takes the topsoil and puts it somewhere else. And once you lose that topsoil, it takes like 200 years to form 1 inch of topsoil. So with the knowledge, I became, in a way, a farmer that replanted native grass that was originally there before it was farmed. I worked well with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, with the USDA, and they gave me funding, cost share programs for water development, for wells. Excuse me. We have probably roughly 15 wells, miles of pipeline under the ground to transport the water to stock tanks, big tire tanks. So we disperse the grazing and try to simulate kind of what the buffalo would have done if they were roaming around with no fences, but on a smaller scheme, doing that with wire fences and water development to try to get them to go around. That hoof action, the foot of the buffalo is, it disturbs the soil. So there's more water infiltration. They don't overgraze areas like beef cattle do. They travel more. They move more across the land to graze and roll around the soil, dispersing seeds that maybe are in their hide, so to speak. When they lose their winter fur for the springtime, when the new babies are starting to come now, we have, I don't know, they just started coming, probably roughly 20, 25 baby calves on the ground. And they're running around out there, and the grass is just starting to grow. But right now we're in a drought, and we had a really light winter, very little snow and no rain. So I guess we're in extreme drought right now, according to the Farm Service Agency, or NRCS. But back to that soil erosion was, we reseeded approximately 2,000 acres of farmland back to native grass. And then we put that back into we call them range units on Standing Rock. They're parcels of land that have a number, and families can apply for those pieces of land to whether it's cattle, whether it's horses, whether it's buffalo. There's certain stocking rates that the Bureau of Indian Affairs says you got to meet this standard. You can't go above this because it could hurt the plants, hurt the soil. So we got to follow those regs. It's not like a ranch that you completely own 100%, where you can do what you want to do. So we got rules to follow here on the reservation, and we just get her done and raise the animals. that people need for us to operate. We need a certain amount of income to pay our bills, and sometimes we give buffaloes away to situations or ceremonies, or for example, the pandemic we're still going through. One of the community development corporations on the reservation approached me and asked me if I would sell them some buffalo meat to feed people on Standing Rock. And sure, I dropped my price by 75% and sold them buffalo bulls, and they'd come out with their truck and trailer, and I'd pick one out and try to get the biggest, and so it produces more meat to be processed, and they load it and haul it to the slaughter facility. So the other thing we're working at is because we're not nomadic no more, we're kind of stationary as people as far as living. We're working on a mobile slaughter facility / brick and mortar slaughter facility. So that's our next step. We raise all natural grass-fed buffalo, no antibiotics, no hormones. And we also raise all natural grass-fed beef. My brother does that. I raise the buffalo, he raises the beef. So, but they're all natural, all grass-fed, and we want to someday package that and sell it to consumers that want that special type of meat that's field killed. That's the way our people used to do it. You know, they field kill it and right out there in the pasture, and instead of loading in trailers. But that's interesting because the buffalo almost went extinct, and we're bringing them back. I guess the last big buffalo hunt here on Standing Rock was 1878, and they killed 5,000 buffaloes in 2 days, our people. So that was the last big buffalo hunt in this part of the country, and 5,000 head of buffalo. That's a lot of buffalo to be killed in 2 days. But I think I'm running pretty much close to my time ending. So I think I'm gonna be quiet for now, and if anybody has any questions later, I could answer them. But I think I'm pretty close.
Well, Wopi Latonka, Ron, appreciate that you were able to join us this morning or afternoon now.
You bet.
Here.
Yeah.
And big Matchwawanan, or great thank you to all of the speakers who are able to join us today. I want to encourage all of the folks in attendance to put your questions in the chat, please, if you would. And then I will read those and we will have the speakers address them. And while we're waiting for some shy folks to give us some questions, I guess I will raise one for all 5 of you. When we look at climate change as it's been happening over the last couple of decades, what would be the key change that's really causing concern for you? There's a range of different things happening, but what would be the one that's really causing you concern, and how are you looking to address that? So I see Ron's on right at the moment. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, I think with what's going on globally, the emission of CO2 and how that affects our weather, it might be in another part of the world, but it affects us right here on the reservations where I live. And so, I'm just a small person trying to do my best to plant native grass, to take care of the grass, where the buffaloes are, that draws down carbon out of the atmosphere. And so I'm doing my little part to try to help Mother Earth. And we need more people, especially in the urban areas, to get on board too.
For sure. Others?
Sorry, I'd just like to add, you don't need to have a farm to grow food. And I think it's so important for everybody, just like, we need people in the urban areas to get on board. And any little piece of earth that we all can put love and care into for the future is needed in our little way to help fight climate change.
Hi, this is Deb. I would just like to say, that we try to say that we want to practice good stewardship, and that goes beyond our work that we're doing in our relationship building with the land and the water, soil, and people. It really needs to get into a different habit. We've all become creatures of habit, and we need to start doing important things like properly recycling is really fundamental. I just wanted to add that note.
Would you like to add anything, Leah?
Well, for us, I think the biggest challenge is the unpredictability of the weather, especially in the springtime. And getting a lot of excess water at the wrong time for us can be really devastating because we have a really long season corn. And so if we can't get it in the 2-week window that we have, maybe 3 weeks if we're lucky, we really can't plant. And so as these kind of weather patterns are shifting around and the precipitation gets more unpredictable, it could really prevent us from being able to plant corn at all. And that's really scary. So we're trying to get around that a little bit with the hiller and with the cover crops, building up the soil so that it can absorb more of that water as it comes in. But we have a lot of work to do and our soils are really damaged. So hopefully we can build it up fast enough to keep those changes at bay.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing your fields. You're doing a lot of really novel things. Anyone else have a question they would like to add? Many expressions of gratefulness for everyone being here. Here's a question. Is Leah growing anything other than corn?
Yeah, last year we put in beans and squash, and they did not take so well to our soils. Our soils were not ready for the beans and squash. So we're going to try again this year and do a little bit better job amending the soil. But we really have 3 different ways of growing the corn. We're doing it conventionally with conventional tillage in one field. And then we have the hilled system where we're doing the 3 sisters and the mounds. And then we have our no-till field where we're just doing corn. And so the conventional field actually saved us last year because the 2 other fields totally failed. So I would say if you're trying to grow a lot of different foods, definitely, come at it a variety of ways. And if you know one way works, keep that in the mix as you start experimenting with other ways to grow, because sometimes that's the only way that you're going to be able to get food off the field.
Anyone else have some questions they'd like to put forward? Here's a question about conflict resolution practices. And I can't remember which of the speakers mentioned conflict resolution.
I think that was me in the co-op. So
Yes.
we have our traditional methods of managing conflicts that arise, which involve, asking elders to kind of mediate the issue. And we also have different ways of addressing issues that arise within the co-op. So if somebody has an issue or an idea that they want to bring before the co-op, they can bring it up 3 times. And if the co-op does not want to move forward with that after 3 times, then the issue is considered at rest. And that's something that is in our teachings of how our Grand Council works. And then the mediation is something that is kind of within our teachings as well. And so we have a couple of women in our group who are trained in conflict resolution, and they manage those affairs. So if there's a conflict between people, they're intended to go talk with these women and reach a resolution and kind of move forward with a good mind, so that we can really keep that good mind around the corn, because that is our teaching. We're not supposed to be fighting. we're not supposed to be bickering when we're working with the corn. It's our spirit food. So we're kind of following those protocols to make sure we can maintain that. Oh, you're muted.
I'm muted. Caught me again. Are there wild plants that anyone is looking to as an adaptation strategy? Philomena is no longer with us at the moment, so she can't address that one. Was anyone else looking to any of the wild plants as a traditional backup, or a tradition that's still up front and center, or something new perhaps?
We use a couple of different plants to soak our corn in, the corn medicines before we plant. So we'll make a tea and soak the corn seeds in there and then plant them. And that really helps keep the insects and the birds from digging up the seeds, which we had a big problem with last year. And so we are getting to know a lot of our other plant relatives that are going to help us in the field. And then we're also starting to learn basketry to do the traditional harvesting baskets and the corn washing baskets. So we're getting to know the black ash tree relatives for that too.
Beautiful. Okay. Question is anyone installing or using local weather stations to keep track of climate change a little more closely than the notes you make yourself? Okay, so that isn't apparently a popular one. I'm lucky where I live. I have someone with a weather station about a quarter mile down the street. A question is, how can we get our people to care and want to help more with these food traditions?
This is Deb. That's $1 million question. It really is, because you know, I know with our program we were suffering under the little red hen syndrome for a few years, but it just seems that you just play it little by little. You're introducing the food, and that's, you know, a way to a man's heart through his stomach, they always say, and so anytime you can feed anybody that has that utilizes all of our crops, they just look forward to the next time they eat. And we have 101 different ways of approaching volunteers, and at the moment we're recruiting 50 volunteers for the 10 weeks program, but we're fortunate in that we get to utilize Spirit of the Sun AmeriCorps program, and so that's recruiting. And you know, basically I just go to the grandmas and say, hey, you got any grandkids that need to go to work, and they're our best advocates for getting us help. I joke, but really there's just it's just a blessing. And you know, appreciate your volunteers for as little or as much as they do, and that's always key. Thank you.
Anyone else have a question you'd like to put to our speakers for today? Here we go. Could folks talk about how land sovereignty relates to your practices of food sovereignty? So anyone, just go ahead and jump in.
I'll say something. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, land sovereignty. Sovereignty, I think, is very important because if you own the land or if you have access to the land that the tribe owns, you can make decisions that, for us, it's raising the buffaloes. If we didn't have that land, we wouldn't be able to raise buffaloes. So by the tribe having the land and we having our allotted land within the tribal land, it helps me make decisions that I wouldn't otherwise be able to make. So our land is important. They don't make no more land today. So what's there is there, and what we have is what we got to work with. So, I know my tribe's been doing a lot over the decades to buy back land that was lost on a reservation. We buy these big ranches, the tribe would, and a lot of those ranches we use for our buffalo herds. My community has their own buffalo herd. They have their own cattle herd. So those ranches that the tribe purchased cash, are now owned by the tribe, and now the enrolled members can make use of that land raising livestock. Because what other animal would eat grass that's waving in the wind? Somebody said that those are dollar bills waving in the wind. What animal can take that protein and develop pounds of meat that consumers want to buy? So a herbivore, or whatever you want to call it, that eats grass can do that with 4 stomachs and take that protein, make pounds equal dollars, and it comes all back into the community.
Anyone else want to mention perspective?
Yeah, our co-op wouldn't be anywhere if we didn't have the backing of the tribe to give us free 5-year leases on about 20 acres of land. So when we first started, we went to the land commission and asked for some land, and they wanted us to bid on it, like every other farmer. And we couldn't afford the prices per acre. And plus, we're not selling our corn. It's all just for subsistence and for trade. And so when we explained a little bit more what we're doing, we're growing as a group, we're doing traditional practices, we're growing traditional foods, they made an exception for us and are talking about kind of writing that into our laws, that if a group of people want to get together and grow traditional foods, that they can access our lands. Because we actually have we have thousands of acres of land, my nation does, that gets leased out to mostly non-native farmers. And so being able to put that land back in the hands of native people growing native foods is really important.
Deb or Jessika?
Yeah, I know our situation's a little different at Dream of Wild Health. We're a intertribal nonprofit, so we don't have a land base, and so a lot of it comes to fundraising. We had a very successful capital campaign last year to help with the purchase of the 20 acres. And so, ours is a little bit slow going, but I would love to see that across Indian country where we're able to support one another, support the work that we're trying to do, and get that, keep those tribal food dollars within tribal community.
Deb, do you have any comments on land availability?
That's always a huge issue, especially in view of the fact that where we have relocated in Oklahoma, most all the good land is, that's been by the creeks and what have you, has really been taken up by the farmers. And so when we go to lease it out, like Leah had said, there's virtually no land that is very fertile, and so we've always had a dilemma these past years. And we're thankful that we have some partners, and we have land that was given back to us in Nebraska, but then we have the issue of getting up there to work it. So Nebraska's doing very well, and we're still working on it here in Oklahoma. It's it's the soil that we keep looking at, and our tribe is interested in pursuing purchasing land, but you know, they're a small tribe and our dollars are few, so it's an issue.
Yeah, thanks to everyone. I see that our time is essentially out. So once again, I want to thank all of the speakers for joining us and sharing their perspectives today. Really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you who have attended. I have put the link for the meeting evaluation into the chat, and it is not at the bottom anymore, but it's not hard to find at the moment. And I guess please join us for the rest of the conference and the Earth Day event that comes afterwards. And we'll see you along the way. Bye now.